The gospel text for this third week of Easter is not for the hard-hearted, nor is it for anyone who is too trapped in their head. For the story is about wounded hearts and slow hearts and burning hearts. This passage invites us to encounter the living Christ in the very heart of who we are, whatever road we are on, whatever is our present reality. Religious writer Kathleen Norris reminds us that to believe is not finally a matter of the mind, but of the heart. For what we believe is what we give our heart to. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all for bringing the intellect into our spiritual searching. In fact, I revel in probing and dissecting the scriptures and putting my mind to what they might be all about, exploring historical context and accuracy, the original author's intent, how and why certain stories made it into the canon and others did not. Wondering about word usage and scholars' interpretations. I delight in all these pursuits. But there are some stories, like today's gospel story of Cleopas and his companion on the road to Emmaus, where what happens in my head seems to take a back seat to what is happening in my heart. And it's difficult to talk historical context with this story, because apparently there is no record of an actual historical location called Emmaus or any road to it. Historian and theologian John Dominic Crossan has used the lack of an actual Emmaus to say Emmaus never happened, and Emmaus always happens, because Christ comes to us again and again in many places rather than in one particular geographical location. And it is not that the facts don't matter. It is just that they don't matter as much as the story does. And stories can be true whether they happened or not. You do not have to do archaeology to find out if they are genuine, or spend years in the library combing ancient texts. You just listen to the story with an open heart. You allow the story to come to life inside of you, and then decide on the basis of your tears or laughter whether the story feels true. Luke is the only gospel writer who tells the story of what happened on the Emmaus Road. But everyone has walked that road at one time or another. It is the road you walk when you've lost your job, and with it, perhaps, a sense of meaning and purpose in your life. It is the road you walk when your dreams lie in tatters. It is the road you walk when your loved one has died through disease or accident or violent tragedy. It is the road of deep disappointment, and walking it is the living definition of sad. There are 4 words in the story that I think are among the most heartbreaking and realistic in all of Scripture. But we had hoped. Hope in the past tense. Somehow the saddest sound a human being can make. But we had hoped. So much is said in those 4 words as they speak of a future that is not to be. A dream that created energy and enthusiasm but did not materialize. It speaks of a future that is closed off, now irrelevant, dead. And there are few things more tragic than a dead future. Once challenged to write a short story in 6 words, Ernest Hemingway supposedly replied by penning on a napkin, "For sale, baby shoes, never used." It's not just the tragedy of what happened that hurts, but the gaping hole of all that could have happened but now won't. But we had hope. I actually resonate with those heartbreaking words Not because I enjoy wallowing in dark or sentimental emotions, but because they ring true to me. They are not the only truth, of course. There is much in this life that is beautiful, daring, confident, inspiring, all of which deserves our gratitude and praise. But there is also disappointment, heartbreak, and sometimes unspeakable tragedy. Heavy on so many Canadian hearts this week are family, friends, and neighbors of the shooting victims in Nova Scotia. A situation of such profound loss and grief that any attempt to offer words of comfort seems inadequate. A situation which involves so many lives cut short needlessly and painfully. And there is no quick repair for aching and broken hearts. And for many, the pain is deepened by the inability to gather with others in grief and truly be present to one another. I think we underestimate the gift of presence. Or at least in the normal course of events, we undervalue it. I'm interested to notice in these days of isolation what it is that I miss. As grateful as I am for the ways we can connect through technology or good old-fashioned phone conversations, there is something intangible in the longing for the tangible, the first-hand presence of others. I can relate to an Anglican priest, Tish Warren, who wrote in a New York Times article, "I miss the congregation singing. If I could hear them sing this morning, I wouldn't even mind if the person behind me was off key. I would even take a whole load of my least favorite hymns, the ones I find plodding or cheesy or overdramatic, if I could just hear us singing them together. I miss gathering together in each other's presence, watching the sanctuary slowly fill, hearing the soft murmur of the crowd, the sounds of children, the coughs, the handshaking, strangers sitting side by side, everything that is now most dangerous. We must embrace social distancing for as long as is needed to protect our healthcare system and the lives of people. But we also need to collectively notice that something profound is lost by having to interact with the world and our neighbors in mostly disembodied digital ways. This is something to lament and grieve, and like all grief, it exposes the value and the glory of the thing that was lost. So perhaps, in a paradoxical kind of way, absence is also underrated. It is not nothing after all. It is something. A heightened awareness, a sharpened appetite, a finer perception. When someone important to me is absent from me, I become clearer than ever what that person means to me. Details that got lost in our togetherness are recalled in our apartness, and their sudden clarity has the power to pry my heart right open. I see the virtues I had overlooked, the opportunities I had missed. The quirks that drove me crazy at close range become endearing at a distance. There's something that happens during an absence. If the relationship is strong and true, the absent one has a way of becoming present, if not in body, then in mind and spirit. Interesting. In our gospel story, the risen Christ appears, and then before the story is over, disappears again, showing perhaps the power of both presence and absence. Perhaps the real point of the Emmaus story is that Jesus does not limit his appearances to those with full confidence in him. He comes to the disappointed, the doubtful, the disconsolate. He comes to those who do not know their Bibles, who do not recognize him even when they are walking right beside him. He comes to those who have given up and are headed back home. All they need do is to be willing to entertain the stranger, to share their bread and their need, and to be present. In the Emmaus story, Jesus did not immediately confront or challenge the disciples with the latest news scoop. I'm back, you should be cheerful, get on with the program, get back to normal. No, he first listened and joined with the disciples in their sorrow, walking the hard road with them as a companion on their journey. That word companion has wonderful Latin roots. Com meaning together and panis meaning bread. So the companion is literally one who shares bread with us. Christ is this kind of companion, who knows how to break open and share bread and break open and share hearts full of emotion and faith. We are called to be this kind of companion for one another. We are called to join the story of God's people, which is about closed hearts being broken open and broken hearts being healed. May it be so. In these days when we are absent one from the other, may it be so. In the days when we can gather together again in one another's presence. Amen.